This is also a real headline. WikiLeaks founder freed after 5 years in prison. We speak, of course, of Julian Assange, whose journey to prominence began really when he began with WikiLeaks, but the new gear of prominence was achieved when he worked with The Guardian on the publication of incredible amounts of classified information. The editor-in-chief of The Guardian at the time was Alan Rusbridger, who joins me now. Did we know this was going to happen, Alan, or does it count as a surprise?
There had been persistent rumours, but I certainly, it was a surprise to me.
So we understand that he's already left the country. He will go to America and he will plead guilty to criminal charges and therefore go free. People will be wondering why he had to spend 7 years hiding in Ecuador's London embassy, and if this culmination was always in sight. But there are two different issues at play here, I think.
Well, I think what happened was the Australian government suddenly took a much more assertive interest in Assange and pleaded directly with Biden to do something about it. And I think, to be honest, he had become something of an embarrassment all round. I mean, this case was like Dickens's Bleak House case of Jarndyce versus Jarndyce. It was a case that was going to go on for decades. And I think Biden or someone close to Biden eventually thought it's just not worth it. The point has been made. I mean, the worrying thing, I mean, it's clearly good news for Assange.
Yes.
It's a bit worrying that he had to cop to a charge under the Espionage Act. And that's what should worry journalists, because it's it has been very, very rare to use the Espionage Act directly against journalists. And I think that's going to become a more common thing. And, of course, the point about that is not only do you do a long time in prison, but there's no defence. You're not allowed to mount any kind of public interest defence.
As in the public interest in the information that you have received and published.
Of course, the government's trying to do this with all kind of protesters now to say
yes.
you have no excuse. You can't tell the jury why you did it. And that is the case now with the Official Secrets Act in the UK and in the US.
No, that is a troubling precedent. I mean, speaking of Jarndyce versus Jarndyce, in which so famously no one could really remember what the original grievance was, how does Assange's legacy look? I mean, has it become not just complicated, but almost obscured by the subsequent legal battles and the falling out with former colleagues and friends and the accusations of criminality in a very different field from espionage or anything else?
I'm sure it may have done a bit. Yeah. I mean, at the time that he was working with five newspapers he was working with, including The Guardian,
yes.
and the stories we were producing were widely acclaimed to be some of the most important stories, of the century to date.
Yes.
They were about, very vital things like torture and rendition and the behavior of, the American troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. Subsequently, he got involved with leaking a lot of stuff about Hillary Clinton in 2016. He wasn't charged with that, but I think people who had been warmly inclined to him before that began to have their doubts.
What do you think happened to him? As someone who knew him, did his head get turned by all the attention, or would that be an unfair analysis? He just perhaps working to a slightly different agenda from the one many people originally assumed?
Well, when I first came across him, he was in Kenya and he was leaking, medium-grade stuff about the Kenyan government. I mean, the stuff he was handling later was like kryptonite, and he had the biggest, most scary intelligence services and governments on his tail, and they were determined to get him and to make an example of him. And I think that would have tested anybody.
Okay.
And he was, I think, put under enormous pressure of the sort that most of us can't imagine.
Did we ever find out why Nigel Farage went to visit him at the Ecuadorian embassy?
I don't think we ever did, no. If you find out, please tell me.
I shall let you know. I don't know whether you'll appreciate this, Alan. I think it's more of a dig at me than praise for you, but Phil's been in touch to say, very pleased to hear your guest pronounce Assange properly.
I'm pleased if I did.
Well, I obviously didn't. Alan Rusbridger, thank you. Comments there on the news that the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has left the UK after reaching a deal with US authorities that will see him plead guilty to criminal charges and go free. But as Alan reminded us, or explained to us, the concern with the espionage charge in particular is that it undermines the future of journalism and protest. If you put them under categories like treason or espionage, you begin to take away, or you even begin and end the taking away of rights that will probably not be shouted from the rooftops by the kind of people who are normally bleating about the supposed erosion of rights.